The gala smelled of desperate ambition. Clara tightened my tie until I choked, smoothing my lapel with a warning touch. At the party, my wife said, "Don't embarrass me. Stay in the back," she whispered. When the owner arrived, he walked past her without a glance. He stopped in front of me, smiled, and said, "I've been waiting for you." My wife froze. Before that moment shattered our reality, however, I was just the silent ghost in her shadow, waiting for permission to breathe. I retreated to a marble column near the service doors. Waiters rushed past with champagne trays, their black vests blending with my cheap rented tuxedo. I was invisible here, a fixture no more interesting than the potted ferns. Clara, meanwhile, was in her element. She moved through the center of the ballroom like a shark, teeth flashing as she laughed at jokes I knew she didn't find funny. She was building her empire, and I was safely out of the frame, unable to ruin the shot. I watched her corner a venture capitalist near the ice sculpture. Her hands animated the air as she retold the story of the grid failure in 2008. It was my story, naturally. I was the one who climbed the pole in the ice storm, but in her version, she was the hero who coordinated the logistics. The man nodded, impressed by her grasp of technical grit. She stole my life, polished the rough edges, and sold it as her own while I checked my watch. A sudden hush swept through the room, silencing the jazz quartet. Heads turned toward the double doors as Elias Thorne entered. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like the tired engineer I used to know, wearing a suit that cost more than my house, but still fit him loosely. The air pressure in the room dropped. Clara straightened her spine, checked her reflection in a wine glass, and prepared to strike. She needed this introduction to secure her funding, and nothing would stand in her way. She glided forward, intercepting his path with practiced grace. I saw her lips move, forming the opening line she had rehearsed in our mirror for days. She extended a manicured hand, her smile dazzling and predatory. But Elias didn't slow down. He moved around her as if she were smoke, his eyes scanning the perimeter of the room with intense focus. Clara's hand was left hanging in empty air, her smile faltering into confusion. He was looking for something real, and she was just scenery. His gaze locked onto me in the shadows. The relief on his face was instant, washing away the corporate fatigue. He marched straight to my column, ignoring the gasps of the elite crowd. When he took my hand, his grip was calloused and warm, a stark contrast to the cold social climbing of the evening. "I've been waiting for you," he repeated, lower this time. Clara stood 10 feet away, frozen in the spotlight, watching the most powerful man in the city bow to her invisible husband. The silence in the car was heavier than the humid night air outside. Clara slammed the driver's side door, sealing us inside the leather-scented vacuum of her Mercedes. She didn't start the engine immediately. She just gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning the color of old bone. I sat in the passenger seat, still feeling the phantom warmth of Elias Thorne's handshake on my palm. It was the only real thing that had happened in 20 years, but in this car, reality was whatever Clara decided it was. She merged onto the highway, driving with aggressive precision. Streetlights flickered rhythmically across her face, illuminating the sharp geometry of her jaw. I waited for the explosion, for the shouting match that usually followed any social deviation, but she remained terrifyingly quiet. It was a punishment, not a pause. She was letting my anxiety ferment, waiting for me to apologize for existing. I stared at the dashboard clock, watching the minutes bleed away, wondering if I had imagined the look in Elias's eyes. "You looked like a lost child," she finally said, her voice smooth and deadly. She didn't look at me, standing there by that column. It was painful to watch. The attack was familiar, calculated to make me feel small. "He spoke to me, Clara," I said, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet cabin. "He knew me." She laughed, then a sharp, brittle sound that cracked against the windshield. "Oh, Jeff, you really don't understand how these people operate, do you?" She tapped the brakes as we hit a patch of traffic. "Elias Thorne deals in dominance," she explained, her tone shifting to pity. "He saw me coming. He knew I was a threat to his market share, so he decided to unsettle me." She glanced at me briefly, her eyes empty of warmth. "He used you, Jeff. He picked the weakest link in the room to throw me off my game. It was a tactic. Don't mistake a billionaire's chess move for friendship." Her words seeped into my chest like cold water. It made sense in a twisted, painful way. Why would a tech mogul remember a junior engineer from 2 decades ago? I was nobody. I was the husband who stayed in the back. The surge of confidence I had felt in the ballroom began to drain away, replaced by the familiar ache of inadequacy. I sank lower in the heated seat, watching the city blur into streaks of neon. She was right. She was always right. My hand drifted to my Toksto pocket, seeking a nervous anchor. My fingers brushed against the card Elias had pressed into my palm during that brief, electric contact. I hadn't looked at it yet. Clara was busy navigating a lane change, her focus entirely on the road. Shielding my hand with my thigh, I pulled the card out just an inch. I expected gold embossing, a logo, maybe a generic assistance number. I expected proof that I was just another contact to be filed away. The passing headlights illuminated the card for a split second. It was matte black, heavy and featureless except for a string of white alphanumeric characters in the center. No name, no phone number, just a code. This wasn't a business card, it was a key. Pity doesn't give you a cipher. A chess move doesn't leave a paper trail. I slid the card back into the darkness of my pocket. She thought she had talked the fire out, but she had only hidden the ember. 2 days later, the house was silent except for the hum of my desktop tower. Clara was at her spin class, buying me exactly 60 minutes of unsupervised time. I pulled the matte black card from my wallet, its edges already fraying from how often I'd touched it. My fingers trembled as I typed the alphanumeric string into a secure browser window. The screen blinked once, a harsh white flash in the dim room, before settling on a simple login prompt. I didn't breathe. A directory of PDF files populated the screen, each labeled with dates from the late 90s. I clicked the first one, expecting a rejection letter or a technical schematic. Instead, I stared at a royalty agreement with a timestamp from 2004. It was for the magnetic coupling system I designed in our first apartment, the one Clara swore was unsellable junk. My name was on the patent line, but the beneficiary address was a P.O. box I had never seen. I opened file after file, my stomach twisting into a tight knot of nausea. The optical sensor array, the vibration dampener, even the high-efficiency battery toggle. They were all licensed. These weren't failed experiments. They were the foundation of industry standards. Millions of dollars had flowed through these contracts over 2 decades. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape that sounded like a scream. I hadn't just been invisible. I had been the bankroll she used to buy the shadows. I needed to see where the money went. I sprinted up the stairs to the master bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The household desktop sat on a sleek glass desk in the corner. I woke the monitor and typed in our shared password, the anniversary of our first date. Access denied. I tried her birthday. Access denied. I tried the date we bought the house. Nothing. She had changed the credentials, locking the digital door while I was sleeping. Panic began to rise, hot and prickly behind my eyes. If she had locked the computer, she knew I might look. I scanned the pristine room, seeking a flaw in her curation. My eyes landed on her antique vanity, the one drawer she never let the housekeeper touch. It was locked, naturally. I didn't look for a key. I went to the garage, grabbed a thin metal shim from my toolbox and returned. The wood gave way with a splintering crack. Inside the velvet-lined drawer sat a thick, leather-bound notebook buried under silk scarves. It wasn't digital, it was the one thing a hacker couldn't touch. I flipped it open, the pages stiff with ink. It was a manual ledger, handwriting precise and sharp. Column A listed my royalty deposits. Column B listed transfers to offshore accounts and shell companies with names like Aegis and Veritas. She was keeping score. Every dollar I made was a point she had stolen. A loose sheet of paper fluttered out from the back of the book. I caught it before it hit the floor. It was a flight itinerary for a private charter to the Cayman Islands, dated for next Sunday, the day after her award ceremony. Beside it was a wire transfer confirmation for the full balance of our joint savings. She wasn't just hiding money, she was leaving. For the first time in a decade, I didn't feel confused. I felt like an engineer looking at a broken circuit. The address from the secure drop box led to a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and old fryer grease. It was 20 miles past the city limits, a place where sleek sedans like Clara's didn't belong. I parked my truck behind a dumpster and walked inside. A man in a gray sweater sat in the back booth, a laptop open but dark. He didn't look like a forensic accountant. He looked like a wary schoolteacher. When I slid into the booth, he didn't introduce himself. He just spun the laptop around. "Mr. Thorne said you like schematics," the man said softly. He pressed a key, and the screen bloomed with a complex web of lines and boxes. It wasn't a circuit board, though it looked like one. It was a flow of money. "These are the royalties from your battery patent." He traced a thick green line. "They enter this holding company in Delaware, bounce to a shell in Panama, and settle here." He tapped a final box labeled CV Holdings. The sum inside made my breath hitch. It was generational wealth. "Maybe it's a tax shelter," I said, the words tasting like ash. I was still trying to defend her. "She manages the finances. She protects us." The accountant looked at me with eyes that had seen too many ruined lives. "Jeff, a shelter protects the owner. This structure is designed to sever connections." He clicked a folder icon. "It's not a savings account. It's a disconnect switch." He opened a document that looked terrifyingly official. "Do you remember breaking your leg 4 years ago?" I nodded, remembering the haze of painkillers and the beep of the hospital monitor. Clara had been an angel then, bringing me papers to sign while I drifted in and out of consciousness. "Insurance forms," she had whispered, kissing my forehead. The accountant enlarged the signature on the screen. It was shaky but unmistakably mine. "This isn't insurance," he said. "It's a durable power of attorney. It gave her the right to act as you in all financial matters. She hadn't nursed me, she had harvested me." He kept scrolling. "The house, the cars, even the life insurance policies. Everything had been transferred or leveraged. She had stripped my name from the deeds while leaving me the liability. She's been preparing this for a long time," the man noted, his voice devoid of judgment. "Since 2018, the liquidity has been moving into cryptocurrency and offshore bearer bonds. It was a demolition of a life, executed with the patience of a glacier. I wasn't a partner in this marriage. I was an asset being liquidated." "Why now?" I asked, staring at the total figure at the bottom of the spreadsheet. "Why did Elias intervene now?" The accountant closed the laptop, plunging the screen to black. "Because she initiated the final phase on Monday." He slid a printed sheet across the sticky table. It was a liquidation schedule. The accounts were set to zero out next Sunday, 24 hours after her awards ceremony. She wanted the applause before she took the money. She wanted to leave me with nothing but a trophy case. I took the paper, folding it until the edges bit into my thumb. "Can we stop it?" I asked. "We can freeze it," he corrected, "but you have to trigger the freeze publicly. If we move now, she hides the keys. You need to catch her hand in the jar while everyone is watching." I stood up, leaving a $20 bill for the coffee. I drove home in silence, the truck rattling, my mind quiet. I wasn't confused anymore. I was ready to build a trap. The kitchen was bright with morning sun that felt like an interrogation light. Clara watched me over the rim of her espresso cup, her eyes searching for cracks in my performance. "You left the garage door open last night, Jeff," she lied smoothly. Again, it was a test. I knew I had closed it, I had double-checked the sensors. But arguing would reveal my clarity. I needed to be the confused husband one last time. "Did I?" I mumbled, rubbing my temple. "I must have forgotten." She sighed, a sound of practiced exhaustion, and reached across the granite island to pat my hand. "It's okay. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe we should schedule that appointment with Dr. Aris after the gala." The threat was subtle but real. Dr. Aris was her psychiatrist friend, the one who prescribed sedatives like candy. I nodded weakly, staring at my oatmeal. "Whatever you think is best, Clara." I let my shoulders slump, hiding the tension coiling in my muscles. 20 minutes later, the front door clicked shut as she left for her private pilot session. The moment her car cleared the driveway, I dropped the act. I didn't run, running leaves traces. I walked calmly to the basement server rack. I pulled the physical hard drives from our shared network, swapping them with identical blanks I'd bought with cash 3 days ago. I wrapped the real drives in anti-static bags and taped them inside the hollow cavity of my old toolbox. She returned just as I was, napping, on the couch, energized by her workout and her looming victory. She tossed a thick packet of paper onto my chest. "I wrote your introduction for Saturday," she said, stripping off her gloves. "It's simple. Just stick to the script, Jeff. Please don't improvise and ruin the pacing." I picked up the pages. The text was large, like a children's book. It was a list of compliments regarding her vision, her sacrifice, and her patience with me. I read the first paragraph aloud, my voice flat. Clara is the architect of our lives, the steady hand that guides us through the storm. It was nauseating. It painted me as the storm she had weathered, the burden she had heroically carried. It's beautiful, Clara. I lied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. I'll practice it tonight. She beamed, satisfied that her prop was functioning correctly. Good. I sent the digital file to the AV team already. She didn't know that the AV team was actually a centralized cloud folder she had given me access to years ago to upload vacation photos. Later that night, while she slept the deep sleep of the righteous, I logged into the event server. I found the teleprompter file labeled introspeechfinal.txt. I didn't delete it. I opened it and replaced the text line by line with the raw data from the forensic accountant's spreadsheet. Then I saved it with the original timestamp. The morning of the gala arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. Clara laid out my tuxedo on the bed, brushing lint from the lapel with aggressive care. Remember, she said, fixing my collar in the mirror. Tonight is about legacy. She saw her reflection, perfect and untouchable. I saw the man standing behind her, a ghost who had finally learned how to haunt the living. I buttoned my shirt, feeling the cold weight of the flash drive in my pocket. I won't forget, I promised. The grand ballroom was a kaleidoscope of crystal and ego. 600 guests sat at round tables, illuminated by violet uplighting Clara selected to flatter her skin. She sat beside me, gripping my hand under the table not with affection, but with the tension of a handler restraining a show dog. Don't mumble, she hissed through a frozen smile as the host began. And don't go off script. I nodded, feeling the flash drive in my pocket like a loaded gun. The room smelled of expensive perfume and rot. Please welcome the woman of the hour. Clara Vance! The applause was thunderous, a wave of noise bought and paid for by the funds she had stolen. She stood up, radiating false humility, and beckoned me to join her. I rose slowly, my legs feeling heavy but steady. The spotlight blinded me, turning the audience into a faceless sea of darkness. I walked up the stairs, counting each step. 1, 2, 3. This was the ascent to the gallows, but she didn't realize she was the one wearing the noose. Clara kissed my cheek for the cameras, a cold brush of dry lips, then stepped back. I gripped the lectern, the wood cool under my palms. The teleprompter screen hummed to life in the back, displaying the first line of her fabricated praise. Clara is the architect of our lives. I stared at the words, feeling the bile rise. I looked at her. She nodded encouragingly, eyes wide with manic anticipation. She wanted her puppet to dance. I cleared my throat and the room fell silent. Clara is the architect. I began, my voice echoing through the speakers. The crowd smiled, expecting rehearsed platitudes. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. But an architect is only as good as the foundation she builds on. I reached into my pocket and touched the drive. I needed them to hear my voice first. And sometimes, that foundation is built on lies. A ripple of confusion moved through the front row. Clara's smile didn't drop, but her eyes hardened into diamond-sharp points of warning. Jeff, Clara laughed nervously, stepping forward to grab my arm. He's a bit overwhelmed, everyone. She tried to pull me away, fingers digging into my bicep with bruising force. I didn't move. I was an anchor now, heavy and immovable. I am not overwhelmed, Clara. I said into the mic, my voice calm and terrible. I am finally lucid. I looked at the AV booth where a confused technician checked the file. Please advance the slide, I commanded. The technician obeyed, and the teleprompter text vanished into the ether. The massive projection screen behind us, meant to display a montage of charity work, flickered blue. Then, the spreadsheet appeared. It was the document from the diner, magnified to 20 feet tall. Columns of numbers, dates of wire transfers, and the unmistakable heading liquidation schedule asset stripping. The audience gasped, a sound like all the air leaving the room at once. It wasn't art, it was evidence. I saw board members in the front row squinting, their champagne glasses frozen. They recognized the account numbers. Clara turned around, her dress rustling like dry leaves. She stared at the screen, her face draining of color until she looked like a wax figure melting under stage lights. "What is this?" she whispered. "Turn it off!" she screamed at the booth. composure shattering into jagged shards of panic. "It's a mistake! Turn it off!" But the slide advanced again. This time, it showed the power of attorney document with the forged signature highlighted in red. The silence in the room was absolute. "This isn't a mistake," I told the room, addressing the stunned faces in the dark. "This is a roadmap of theft." I pointed to the screen. "That transfer on the 4th of October. That was the college fund for our nieces. The withdrawal on the 1st of November. That was the employee pension fund you thought was secure." I looked at the CEO of her partner company. "And that shell company in Panama. It's funded by the royalties from the patents you thought you owned." The room erupted into chaos. Clara lunged for the podium laptop, trying to kill the feed, but the system was locked. In the center of the chaos, one man stood up slowly. Elias Thorne. He didn't look at the screen, he looked at me. He raised his glass in a solemn toast, then turned to the security detail standing by the wall. He nodded once. It wasn't a signal of rescue, it was a signal of execution. The guards didn't move toward me. They moved toward the stairs, blocking Clara's only exit. "You ruined everything," Clara hissed, tears of rage cutting tracks through her foundation. She looked small now, stripped of her curated narrative. "I made you," she spat. "You were nothing without me." I stepped back from the podium, leaving the microphone live. "No, Clara," I said, my voice quiet but amplified to every corner of the hall. "You just stood in front of me." I turned my back on her and walked down the stairs. I didn't look back at the screen. I knew what it said. Security shoved us into the green room, the heavy door muffling the roar of the scandalous crowd. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a holding cell lined with velvet chairs and stale fruit platters. Clara stumbled in, her heels twisting in the carpet, stripped of her grace. She looked wild, her hair escaping its pins, her breathing ragged and shallow. I stood near the exit, watching her unravel. The room felt too small for her rage and my silence. She spun around, eyes searching for a weapon, finding only me. "You stupid, selfish man," she screamed, the sound tearing her throat. She didn't ask about the money or the fraud. She only cared about the image I had shattered. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The donors are out there. The press is out there." She paced the small room, kicking a chair aside. "You had a psychotic break. That's what we'll tell them. You are off your meds." She was already rewriting history, frantically trying to patch the dam with lies before the water drowned her. A young PR assistant hovered in the corner, clutching a phone like a lifeline. Clara lunged at her. "Tweet it now. My husband is suffering a medical episode. Get Dr. Embarrass on the line." The girl didn't move. She looked from Clara's manic face to my calm one, then down at her phone where the news was already trending. "I can't, Clara," the girl whispered, backing toward the door. "The board just issued a statement. You are suspended." She slipped out, leaving us alone in the cold fluorescent light. Clara froze, the silence of the room amplifying the hum of the vents. The suspension was the first real blow, the crack in the armor she couldn't polish away. She turned to me, her face contorting from command to victimization. "They're going to ruin us, Jeff," she said, her voice dropping to a tremble. "Everything we built, the house, the legacy, it's all gone because you couldn't just trust me." She walked closer, smelling of fear and expensive hairspray. "I did this for us, to secure our future." I didn't back away this time. I reached into my jacket pocket, not for a handkerchief to dry her crocodile tears, but for the thick envelope Elias's lawyers had prepared. "There is no us, Clara," I said, placing the packet on the glass coffee table. "There hasn't been for a decade." The heavy thud of the paper sounded like a gavel. She looked at it, then at me, confusion warring with the dawn of realization. "What is that?" she asked, though I think she already knew the answer. "It's a divorce filing," I explained, keeping my voice steady, "and a copy of the criminal complaint filed with the district attorney this morning." She recoiled as if the paper were radioactive. "You went to the police," she gasped. "Jeff, you can't. That's prison. That's real prison." She reached out, her fingers trembling, finally understanding that the script had changed. "I am your wife. You can't send your wife to jail." She sounded small, a child caught with a stolen toy, begging for a timeout instead of expulsion. "You didn't act like a wife when you forged my signature," I said. "You didn't act like a wife when you stole my pension." I watched her process the charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement, Identity theft. The list was long and comprehensive. She sank into a velvet chair, the fight draining out of her legs. I can fix it, she muttered, bargaining with ghosts. I have money offshore. We can go away, just you and me. We can start over. She was still trying to buy me. The accounts are frozen, Clara, I said, delivering the final mercy kill to her delusion. The forensic team locked them 10 minutes ago. You don't have a passport, you don't have access, and you don't have me. She looked up, her eyes wide and hollow, seeing a stranger where her doormat used to be. For the first time, she wasn't calculating an angle. She was just staring at the consequences of her own greed. The power in the room had shifted permanently, settling onto my shoulders. I twisted the gold band off my finger. It had felt like a shackle for years, a circle of metal that bound me to her fiction. I walked over to the side table where her ethical leadership trophy sat, a jagged piece of crystal that mocked everything she stood for. I placed the ring on the tip of the award. It slid down with a sharp clink, resting at the base like a discarded offering. You can keep the trophy, I said. It cost you everything. I turned toward the heavy fire exit door, ignoring her sudden, strangled sob. Jeff, wait, she called out, her voice cracking. I can't do this alone. I paused with my hand on the push bar, the cold metal grounding me. You've been doing it alone for years, Clara, I said without turning around. I was just the audience. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the alley. The night air hit my face, cold and smelling of rain, tasting sweeter than any champagne. The smell of ozone and pine resin was better than any expensive perfume. My new workshop was a converted warehouse loft, messy in a way Clara would have despised. Wires hung like jungle vines from the ceiling, and schematic papers covered every flat surface. I wasn't hiding anymore, I was building. A high-efficiency generator hummed on the central bench, a prototype that worked. For the first time in 20 years, the noise in my head was gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of a soldering iron. I was finally breathing my own air. My hands were stained with grease and silver thermal paste, but they didn't look rough to me anymore. They looked useful. I spent my days solving problems that had answers, not navigating the emotional minefield of a narcissist. The silence here wasn't a punishment, it was a canvas. I tightened a coupling on the fuel cell, feeling the satisfying resistance of the metal. There was no one here to tell me I was confused. The machine responded to physics, and physics never lied to manipulate you. A heavy knock on the metal fire door broke my focus. Elias Thorne walked in without a security detail, carrying 2 cardboard cups of coffee. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a guy who needed a break from board meetings. He set the coffee down on a stack of blueprints, ignoring the dust. The battery efficiency is up 12%. He noted, glancing at the monitor. He didn't ask how I was doing. He respected me enough to know that the work was the answer. We secured the patent rights yesterday, Elias said, taking a sip of the dark roast. The court unraveled the last of her shell companies. He didn't say her name. She was just a ghost in the machine now, a glitch we had patched out. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. And the restitution? I asked. It's starting, he replied. But, you know, the money isn't the point. He was right. The point was that I could look at a circuit and know I designed it. Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope. This came to the office, he said, from the state penitentiary. I took the letter. The handwriting was jagged, desperate, lacking the cursive precision she used to pride herself on. I felt the weight of it, the last attempt to pull me back into her orbit of chaos. I didn't feel anger or pity. I felt nothing at all. I walked over to the industrial shredder and fed the envelope into the teeth. The paper screamed as it turned into confetti, joining the scraps of old schematics in the bin. Elias watched me, a faint smile touching his lips. Ready to get back to work? He asked. I never stopped. I answered. I picked up the soldering iron, watching the tip glow orange with heat. I didn't need to stand in the back anymore, but I didn't need the spotlight either. I just needed the bench, and the tools and the truth. I was finally building something that would last.